Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Focus on UATV. Russia's military machine is running on empty. Despite high oil and gas prices, Ukraine continues to systematically destroy the Kremlin's export capabilities. Inside Russia, the situation is so bad that fewer and fewer men are willing to join the army. The so-called Second Army in the world is stuck on the battlefield, bleeding resources and manpower. How much longer can this rotten pseudo-empire hold together? Ukraine's powerful strikes keep knocking out Russian oil infrastructure, and the growing crisis in Russia as the Kremlin struggles to find new cannon fodder. Ukrainian drone strikes continue to hit the heart of Russia's war economy. The Bashneft-Novoil refinery in Ufa was partially shut down after a precise attack on its primary processing unit, responsible for 28% of the plant's capacity. In just 13 days, Ukrainian forces struck at least 8 distant targets, while the rate of destroying Russian air defense systems has nearly tripled. These blows are already cutting Russia's export capabilities by 20%. Watch how Ukraine is steadily dismantling the financial backbone of Putin's aggression.
The Russian oil refinery Bashneft-Novoil has partially halted operations following an attack by Ukrainian drones. This was reported by Reuters, citing sources. The strike targeted the primary crude distillation unit, one of the plant's key facilities, which accounts for approximately 28% of the refinery's total capacity. Ukraine's defense forces attacked the Bashneft-Novoil plant in Ufa on April 2nd. The distance from the Ukrainian border to the target is about 1,400 kilometers. Ukraine is thus continuing and intensifying pressure on the enemy's oil infrastructure.
According to data from industry sources, the plant processed 3.8 million metric tons, or 76,000 barrels per day, of oil in 2024, accounting for 1.4% of Russia's total, from the Reuters publication.
Russian air defense systems are unable to effectively repel Ukrainian attacks on oil facilities. The sites are widely dispersed, while air defense capabilities remain limited. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War note that in just 13 days, Ukrainian forces struck at least 8 targets located more than 1,700 kilometers apart. Moreover, over the past 3 months, the rate at which Russian air defense systems have been destroyed has nearly tripled. These figures are provided by OSINT analyst Kyle Glenn, based on data from Ukraine's unmanned systems forces.
The massacre of Russia's air defense visualized. Ukraine's drone units have struck 85 SAM systems, or complex radars, in 2026. This is a 240% increase on the previous 3 months, and is almost certainly why we're seeing more success from Ukraine's long-range strikes. Kyle Glenn, OSINT analyst, on Social Network X.
Moscow's revenues from energy resources remain high due to the fighting in Iran, as the price of Brent crude exceeds $100 per barrel. However, attacks on Russia's 2 main export ports in the Baltic Sea could significantly reduce this profit. 5 attacks on the Primorsk and Ust-Luga ports have caused Russian energy companies losses of approximately $970 million per week. Primorsk and Ust-Luga together handle more than 40% of Russia's seaborne oil exports.
Before the full-scale invasion, the Russian Federation earned about $3 billion per week from the sale of Urals crude oil. Today, this revenue has fallen to $1 billion, and this is despite a global shortage of oil and oil products. This shows that our sanctions are working effectively. We are already seeing the terminal in Ust-Luga, Leningrad region, the largest Baltic terminal for loading crude oil, including for the Shadow Fleet, catch fire for the 5th time.
Russian oil companies will inevitably reduce production due to Ukrainian strikes on port infrastructure. As a result of attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces, Russia's export capacity has already dropped by 20%. This is reported by Reuters, citing 3 sources in the Russian oil industry. The state-owned company Transneft, which handles more than 80% of Russian oil transportation, has warned that the damaged Baltic port of Ust-Luga will be unable to load oil at the planned volume in the first half of April.
According to the sources, Transneft notified exporters that Ust-Luga was unable to load oil in line with the initial exporting schedule due to the recent damage. One of the sources said Transneft also said it was unable to take into its system full oil volumes from producers scheduled for exports via Ust-Luga. From the Reuters publication,
Partial resumption of oil loading through the terminals may be possible within several days. However, full restoration will take at least several months. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has admitted it cannot guarantee 100% protection of energy facilities, and is now demanding that companies independently purchase electronic warfare systems and organize their own security. Reported by Victoria Kistukina, UATV News.
While Ukraine keeps striking Russian infrastructure with precision, the Kremlin faces a deepening manpower crisis. The plan to recruit 409,000 contract soldiers this year is failing. Losses on the battlefield far outpace new recruits, forcing Moscow to scrape the bottom of the barrel, using convicts, students, and foreigners. Even universities are being turned into recruitment tools. See how Russia's army is slowly running out of people, while Ukraine's forces grow more effective every month.
Russia's plan to recruit contract servicemen for the war against Ukraine is close to failing. This year, the Russian Ministry of Defense expected to bring in 409,000 people, roughly 35,000 per month. However, the actual pace of Russian mobilization is significantly lower.
Instead of the expected 1,100 to 1,150 contracts per day over the first 3 months of 2026, the average daily number of people signing contracts was just over 940. At the same time, it should be remembered that the number of signed contracts is not the same as the number of recruits who actually arrive at their units. Roughly speaking, if this trend continues, Russia may fall short by 16%, or more than 65,000 people, from an article by UDF.
At the same time, Russian army losses at the front remain high. In March alone, Russia lost around 35,000 servicemen. The pace of personnel replacement is no longer covering the level of losses, creating additional pressure on the recruitment system. Meanwhile, Ukraine's armed forces are setting new, even higher monthly targets for eliminating occupying troops.
More than 35,000 occupiers were taken off the battlefield. What does this mean? It means that the defense forces are gaining the capacity to fulfill the task that was set and communicated to the troops, namely, to move closer to the mark of 50,000 occupiers destroyed on the line of combat contact per month. If we destroy more than they can put into service each month, and we did destroy more, then, as a consequence, their plans and actions become impossible to implement because they simply do not have enough people to move forward actively.
Because of the shortage of manpower, the Kremlin is being forced to use the so-called special contingent, meaning convicted prisoners, people under investigation, and defendants awaiting trial. In this way, Russia is actively using the amendments to the criminal code adopted in 2024, which allow conditional or full release from punishment for suspects and convicts who signed a contract with the Ministry of Defense, were decorated, or were discharged from military service after being wounded.
At least 263 Russians were given suspended sentences or released from penal colonies on these grounds. Among them are people accused or convicted of drug trafficking, assault, theft, fraud, robbery, drunk driving, corruption, as well as at least 1 convict for rape, 13 people charged with murder, and 11 charged with inflicting grievous bodily harm resulting in death, from an article by Verstka.
At the same time, the Kremlin is also acting ever more aggressively through universities. Russian universities are effectively being turned into recruitment tools. As the Moscow Times writes, the country's largest universities have been ordered to send at least 2% of their students to war. At one Russian technological university, amid attempts to push students into the army, expulsion rules have been sharply tightened. Now, even a single academic debt can be grounds for expulsion, whereas previously the critical threshold was 5. Earlier, students on the verge of expulsion were offered a choice: either lose their place at university or sign a contract to serve in UAV units. Now, however, the Russian Federation is creating that threat of expulsion itself. In this way, the system of recruiting people into the army is going beyond the bounds of voluntariness and increasingly resembles hidden mobilization, experts note.
The authorities are taking such steps only because they are very afraid to carry out full mobilization, and accordingly, there will most likely be some new measures invented by the authorities in order to postpone that moment. There is no good outcome here, so to speak, and therefore, all of this, one way or another, turns against the authorities. The Russian troops and Russian command are now attempting all kinds of meat assaults, where people do not matter and are simply thrown, almost without weapons, straight into the line of fire. So, of course, they are running out of people.
Another source of personnel replenishment is foreigners. This year, Russia plans to recruit at least 18,500 citizens of other countries. But problems are arising here too. A number of states are actively countering the recruitment of their citizens for the war, which is narrowing this channel as well. As a result, the Kremlin is being forced to literally piece together its army through every possible avenue, from prisoners to students and migrants. Reported by Maria Zheluchenko, UATV News.
That's today's In Focus. Russia's war machine is cracking under the pressure. Ukraine continues to destroy its oil infrastructure and export routes, while the Kremlin struggles to replace the tens of thousands of soldiers it loses every month. This rotten pseudo-empire is running out of both money and men. Ukraine, on the other hand, keeps adapting, striking precisely, and holding the line with unbreakable resolve. Thank you for watching. If you value clear, honest reporting from Ukraine, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with friends who understand real strength. Together we keep moving forward. See you next time. Stay focused, stay unbreakable. Slava Ukraini!